Hello, my name is Rachel Rose, and I'm interviewing Ann Leikach here from, um, I'm from Goucher College, and Jasmine Stanley is doing the camera, and Dustin Morris is doing the notes. So, thank you. Let's begin. So, hi.
Meet again.
We meet again. How old were you when the war ended?
When the war ended, I was 16, would be like 20, the war was from 1939 until 45. So it was like 4.5 years or so. So by the time the war ended, I think 1945, I was from 23 to 45. So 12 years old. No, 22 years old.
22 years old. I see.
Yeah. From, let's see, from 23, that's until 23 until 45, it's 33, 43, it's 22 years old, 22 years old, yeah.
Were you in the work camps until the end of, not the camps, but the work settlement, the communal settlement, what was it called, until the end of the war?
Yeah, no, it was not that. Well, I was in the work settlement until the Russians were attacked by the German attacked Russia. That's when they freed us. Because before we were sort of like suspected citizens. They didn't trust us because we were Polish people. Just running over, we chased from the Nazis, the occupied Poland. And but there were too many people running, so they were trying to prevent diseases because people lived in very unsanitary conditions. So they decided to resettle us into Russia, and some of them that went, but they were registered to go to Russia and become citizens, but we didn't want to become citizens because we find out what the Soviet regime was like. So we were just, waiting, trying to wait the war out it was actually in Białystok, which was a Polish city, only it was occupied by the Russian, that part that Russia occupied of Poland. And of course, a lot of people were running when we were coming, when the Nazis started to open up ghettos and form ghettos and later the concentration camps. So a lot of people began to run, whoever could run, and they crossed the border, into Russia, and it was getting to be the point that people were sleeping in school floors and stuff, any place that they for shelter, they could find shelter. So they actually, in one night, they conducted a registration, and they knew where all the people are living. They gave us a choice to become their citizens, or we want to go back to the Germans. So of course we didn't fill in anything, but in the middle of the night, they came and they picked up all those people that were illegal. I mean, they were just in another, city. So they picked us all up, and during the night, and by morning, we were all put into cattle cars on the train. And by daybreak, the train was, filled with people from all different streets and different, places. People that they knew that all these people running. People from Poland that ran away from, the Nazis' occupation. So they put all of this, because all of us in closed trains, cattle trains, and they started to ride into Russia. We didn't know where we were going to be taken. During the trip, they would stop on certain stations and would bring in food for each wagon, so that we were not, hungry. We had food to eat during the trip, but they dropped off as they were the train was going into Russia. We didn't know where it was taking us, but they would drop off a group, certain people in certain places, like a couple hundred of people from the train in different locations. We happened to get dropped off. It was something I would imagine must have been like maybe 300 or maybe 200 or 300, I don't know. I couldn't imagine, but in one place, which was just one building, not a high-story building, but just one of those one-floor places that we were all sleeping on the floor, but they conducted a registration of anybody, what kind of trade they were for the war. So if somebody was a carpenter or some kind of a job that they could use in this place, so my oldest brother was registered, he said that he was a carpenter. So he worked in the facility to build more buildings, to resettle all these people, to give them a little bit more privacy, so that eventually we wind up having our own little room, one room for our family. But before we were just laying on the floor until, warm inside, and we started to work on jobs. But the living condition was very, very limited, because they didn't have enough room yet for families to separate. So we were living, but after a while, when they were built a couple more buildings, so our family, we were 5 kids, and our parents were 7 people, so we were given one room, which was, we had a bed one way and down this way, and 2 people in a bed, and then at a very small beds was managing. And when my oldest brother, he came in, we had to close the door and open up a bed for him to sleep by the door. But it was privacy. We had our own place, and my mother was the housekeeper, and she was trying to make meals. We used to go to pick mushrooms or berries that was growing in the woods. But this location was just forests, nothing else, no other industry here. So the people that didn't have any trade that they could work in this facility, like my father, he was a candy maker, so that's all he knew what to do. So they just sent him to the forest to chop down trees, because that's what their industry was. They used to chop trees and put it, we had a little river going through, which was in the winter time, during I guess it's in spring, that river would be filled up with high with water, and they actually used to take the trees. The trees were cut down into different sizes. Some of them was for telephone poles, some of them was for just building, making boards or something. It was different sizes, it depended how thick the trees were. You had to, they had to learn all this, how to do it, and that was very difficult work, and it was paid very little. But because they had to get up early in the morning when it was dark, my father and my older sister, because she was older, older than the age that they forced her to work in the forest. I was still considered a minor, so they couldn't put me to chop down trees, but I still had to work, and I was working, I think I mentioned this in the previous tape about this. So anyway, I'm just going, I don't want to be repeating the same thing because it was there, but when the war, when the Germans attacked Russia, that's when Russia was already in war itself. So they freed us because they needed all the people to help defend them against the Germans. But of course, we were not soldiers, so they had to free us, and they told us that we are now the same as they are Russian citizens, and we are free to leave, we are free to stay if you like to, and be treated as Russian people, because they had a few Russians that worked, that lived there actually, and they were working, with us. But we were given the choice, so since it was here very cold weather, we decided to go someplace where it was warm, and we went away to Uzbekistan. And over there we settled in a farm, for a while, and it was very difficult. We were not getting paid, we were not getting food. We stayed through there. That was the place that we stayed until the war ended. When the war came to an end, we decided to go back home. We didn't want to live, under the Russian regime. It was, much more difficult than we were used to, but we learned how to make candies, and towards the end, after we survived typhoid fever and all kinds of problems, but we survived, the war ended, and we decided to get back home. And it was a long journey for us, but we came into Poland. When we arrived in Poland, we had no idea what was going on in Poland during the war. We thought, because in Russia they didn't let us, we didn't get in the newspapers, they didn't write about what the Germans were doing to the Jewish people. So when we came back to Poland, we were hoping to find our extended relatives who lived in different little towns, but then when we came into Poland, we realized that they were all killed. There were nobody in the relatives that survived. We survived because we were chased out, and that's what made us, saved our lives. But the other people that were not chased out, they were eventually gathered by the Germans and sent into different places, and eventually they were killed. They were dead. So we did not have any relatives that survived. And we decided we didn't want to stay there. But from the Russian, we could not immigrate anywhere. So the main thing was we had to get out of Poland. And we started to correspond with our relatives. My mother had two brothers in Detroit in America. And so we were corresponding with them all the time. And of course they wanted very much, they were concerned about us. They were glad that we were alive, but they themselves, one of my uncles lost his wife and a child because they were in Poland. He left to America just before the war broke out, and he was separated from his family, so his wife and child were killed. But they were in Detroit, and they were very, they were glad that we survived.
Sorry, who is in Detroit?
I haven't yet. In Detroit was, in America.
Your brother?
My mother's brother.
Your mother's
brother lived. And of course, by now they all deceased, they all gone. But at that time, when the war was ended in 1945. But before we would get able to immigrate from Poland, we had to get out of there. So we got in contact with it was a lot of people were just smuggling the border from Poland out into Czechoslovakia and then to Austria, because from there you could immigrate places. But we wanted to go to Palestine. There was no Israel then. That was my father was very interested. But in the meantime, we went with our kibbutz to cross the border, because they used to go, that was routinely, they would smuggle children, young people that were single people, survivors, they had no family, so everybody wanted to get out of Poland because there was a communist regime there.
So your parents were killed trying to cross the border to get into Poland.
To Poland, we all came together.
Oh, you all came together.
Yeah, but we never did go to our hometown, because that was still very dangerous. There were no Jewish people there, and there still was anti-Semitism in Poland after all this war. They were still having, problems with, Polish people who were very anti-Semitic. But the majority, I'm not going to say that all, but the majority were still. And it just so happened that when my parents were crossing the border, that we were going in groups. We couldn't go. The young people were walking on foot in the middle of the night when it was a dark night, and they crossed it to a mountainous border. But for the parents, the kibbutz organized that the parents would go by a truck to bribe the guards at the border and yet smuggle these people, the parents of us, to bring them across the border. But that particular night, when my parents and my older brother were going, they attacked they opened fires. That was the underground, the Polish underground that was trying to overthrow the Russian regime. So they used to do all kinds of I don't know how to express, like they were trying to give problems to the Russians because they were trying to overthrow the Russian regime. So they're like, burning, breaking up trains and, doing
Almost
something.
like terrorism?
Terrorism, right. So, but they used to wander around at night times and do these things, but they knew that a lot of Jewish people are crossing the borders. So they felt like this was a good place to rob these, because and their mind was that the Jewish people are all rich, they all have sacks full of gold, and they, so it was the right thing to just attack them. And that particular night, they opened fire and during the night, and when my parents were with another 12 people on 2 trucks trying to cross the border, they opened fire and they realized they were being shot at, so they all jumped off the trucks, and so is my brother and my parents. But it was during the night, and the firing was going on for quite a while. And by morning, my brother was climbing. He found out that everybody was trying to, find a place where they can hide from the running bullets. And by morning, when it started to daybreak, my brother realized that he was on the top of a hill, and when he climbed down from the hill, he realized that my parents were dead, and there were other people that were dead, and a few people were wounded. So they crawled out, and they realized that by daytime they didn't see who were the attackers. Of course, they ran away. But by the time my brother and another couple of guys that were wounded, but they were able to walk to the nearest village to try to get some help for the few people that are wounded, and also to take the people that were killed. So they started to interrogate. My brother was also wounded, only a small, right in the temple, but he was okay. And now, of course, he realized that my parents were killed. So he was trying to get some help for the few people that were wounded. So by the time they came out with a truck to pick them up, my parents were left. All the clothes was taken away, whatever they were having on. So because there was nobody around there, so they robbed away even the things where they didn't have any packages, because they were not allowed to take much. They just had like a small suitcase, a small briefcase to carry, because they were going to walk through a border. And anyway, by the time my brother came back with some help to see the wounded, those that were wounded had died, and the dead people were all taken, all their clothes and all belongings were stolen. So by morning, and I was with my younger sister, when they were all crossing the border. She had a fever, we couldn't take her on the trip, so I stayed behind with my younger sister, the one that is in Detroit. She just called me, by the way. And anyway, but we were going to meet up after we'll get across the border another time, that she's going to get better, because we didn't want to take her sick child. And on the road, we didn't know where we were going. We were coming into a strange country. But in Poland we couldn't be anymore, because we didn't even want to go down to see what's going on, what was in our hometown, because there were nobody there. That we were very hostile to Jewish people. Anyway, so we eventually, my parents were buried in Poland, and my brother was the one. My brother and my younger sister and I joined. Crossed the border later with my other two siblings, my younger brother and older sister, and we came through Czechoslovakia, and then through Austria, We made just short trips there, stopped, just to stop, and because we were traveling with our kibbutz, the same people that we were starting off, we joined with them, and we met up, and we wind up to live in a city named Ulm, which is, I don't know how far from Munich. And we lived in a caserne, which is in the suburb of the city of Ulm. It was big buildings that used to live for soldiers. It was German soldiers used to live there, before the war. So we settled in that camp, and I think it was the UN, the UNRWA, which is like the Hayas now, organization was doing a lot of support, and we were getting food. We were working in the camp. My brother was working in the office. There were some of our kibbutz guys working as policemen or guards and stuff. It was not no robberies going on because we didn't have very much, but we sort of sustained ourselves in these camps, and the government supported us, and of course we decided, since our parents were gone, we didn't want to go to Palestine because our uncles from Detroit were sending us papers to come to America, and we decided to change our plans, and instead there was no Israel then. But my older sister, the one, she met a guy in the kibbutz, and they fell in love. So they didn't want to come to America. She wanted to go to Israel, and she's the only one that left to Israel. And that time was Palestine. Israel was established, and she left in 47, and I think it was in 47 she left to Israel, and Israel became in 48 the independence. So, but we sent out, we filled out forms, and we decided to go to America. It was my older brother, me, and my younger brother, younger sister. And my younger brother and younger sister were living in a different camp because they needed schooling, a higher grade of schooling. But in our camp we had also schools, but only like for 2 grade, the first and second grade. But eventually my husband, I met him in the camp, in this, not camp, it was it was a camper. We were living in Hindenburg, Kaserne, it was called in German, and I met him, and of course our papers came after a long wait. The immigration, the papers came for us to come to America, and of course I met we were not engaged or anything, but we sort of had a understanding that whenever he's going to be able to come to America, because he also had applied the papers, but it was for immigration were overloaded with the Polish court that was very slow. But eventually we arrived to Detroit, the 4 of us, and my boyfriend came a year and a half later, so we were married in Detroit, and I decided to move to Baltimore. His family was here in Baltimore, and I was in Detroit working in a shop, finishing clothes, and I was working on ladies' garments and ladies' suits and coats. And after a while I was working piecework, so I was working and making out quite well. But my older brother was working in different jobs. He was working first for a candy factory, and then he was working for a cleaners. But we got our own apartment. My uncles were very, we stayed for a few weeks with my uncles, the girls with one uncle, the boys with the other uncle, but they were very wonderful to us. But we wanted to have a apartment so that we can go to work and build our lives. So that's what we did. We got an apartment. We did our own decorating. My young aunt got some furniture, whatever they had, and we had our house. I got a job. My younger sister the youngest sister, she went to high school, and during the summer we came in to Detroit in June, and during the summer she went through I think 10th grade of high school. In 2 months she made the 10th grade, and by September she went into the 11th grade. So she was the only one that was going to day school, to high school. But my two brothers and I, we were going to night school for 4 evenings, and we were going, each school had one had Monday and Wednesday, and the other one Tuesday and Thursday, that we were going to night school. And we went by bus, we didn't have cars, but we were trying to learn English. And we were going to visit. It was mostly for adult education, nighttime. So we learned English and a little bit of American history and a little bit of American geography. So it was very helpful, because when we came to America, we didn't speak a word of English. We didn't, so it was difficult, I remember my first job, I was working in a warehouse, and I was speaking German. There was one foreman that spoke German, so I was communicating, because Yiddish is very similar to German. So he showed me how to operate on one machine, and of course I was doing it because I saw what he was showing me. But that was I was getting paid 60 cents an hour, and we worked a whole week. I got $22 or $21 for a whole week of work. But eventually I found out, and I applied, and I got a job for this finisher in a clothing factory. So I started to work piecework, so I made a lot, much better. And I quit that job, and so when my boyfriend came a year and a half later, by then I saved up about $1,000 or $1,500 we had a wedding there, so my aunt and uncle made for us a shower. I had a very big, beautiful shower in a hall, and I got almost everything what you need for a housekeeping, because I didn't know anybody there, and I felt so embarrassed, because in Europe we don't know such a thing as getting gifts from strangers. But my aunt insisted that I have to have a shower in a hall with catered stuff, and it was very embarrassing, but it was very helpful. Because when I moved to Detroit and we rented an apartment, I started off, I had pots and pans and tablecloths and sheets and a lot of stuff to really, that because we didn't have anything, so it was a big help. Of course, I came to Baltimore, and I worked for a while in a clothing place, but there was not paid as well as I was getting paid in Detroit. But my husband had here a lot people from his hometown that settled in Baltimore, and he was, so we find out that they were very successful. They all came not speaking English, because my boyfriend, my husband, didn't speak a word of English. I was a year and a half before, so by the time, we came to Baltimore, and I was the one that was already speaking a little bit of English, and we realized that most of the newcomers that were coming to Baltimore went into the grocery business in black neighborhoods. And I was wondering, we went to one family that my husband knew from Poland, from his hometown, and he was staying in a grocery store. So he says, it was one of those small grocery stores that the customers were neighbors. They knew where everything was, they knew how much it cost, and the black people didn't speak such a good English either, so it was very, somebody would come in and ask for something, and I was out of the store, so my husband would ask him, what do you use it? Is it something to eat, what you eat, drink, or what you eat? And that's how we find out what they wanted, what they asked for, and they knew how much, and they were mostly the neighbors. And they were very nice people, and we lived upstairs, and most of my children were born, we bought a grocery store. We first bought a grocery store, eventually, at first I was working on a job, and my husband was working on a job. But then we were starting to look for a grocery store, and we find one in Baltimore. We lived on Cross Street, not far from the Cross Street Market. And we didn't do, my aunt, my husband's cousin, signed for us in the bank because we didn't have enough money to buy a store. But she offered to help us out. She signed for us, and we were paying her every month. We were trying to pay off. The store was, I think, $8,500, and we were rushing to pay off. We had our own, I think, something like $2,000 from the gifts from showers that I returned. Some things I didn't need, 2 toasters or some other thing. And that's how we settled in Baltimore. My son was born a year and a half after I was, we were married, and 4 years later, my daughter was born, and we lived upstairs, above the grocery stores, which was much easier for us. We did, because we worked very long hours, 7 days. We only had a half a day on Sunday that we would close the store, and then we would just go by bus. We would to visit with some friends, and eventually we bought a car. After a few years, we bought a car from one of our neighbors' customers, and it was a used car. But my husband, and one of our neighbors took my husband and gave him driver lessons. And he learned how to drive, and after a while, I learned how to drive. The same neighbors would take me out whenever they come from work. And they used to work on the night shift, and in the daytime, he would take me out for a ride and show me how to drive. And eventually, and then after a while, we I think, when I had my daughter, we lived in the first grocery store from, but when my son was 5 years old. 5 years old, he started kindergarten, not in the when we were still in the grocery store. But then we bought a house out in the suburbs in Ford's Lane. That was our first house, and I tried to be home with the children, when we moved out. And for the weekend, I had to go out with my husband to help him in the store. We had only one car, so I had a babysitter stay overnight, sleep over Friday night, so I could go with him Saturday in the store and stay with him. And then after, first my son, my oldest one, was kindergarten, but my younger one was just about I think she was a year and a half when we moved out into the house. For a while I was staying with the kids home, but after a while, when they were in school, we bought a second car, and I was able to go to the store. When the kids were first, I used to, when my husband needed to get a haircut, I would go with both children. I traveled with 2 buses to go to the store to give him, a chance. So he needed to take care of some things, so he couldn't, because the store had to be open all the time, and he didn't have that kind of help that he could leave anybody in charge of the store. But whenever he needed some things, I took with both children. We traveled by bus, and we changed, I think I remember it was 2 or 3 buses to get to the store. And, but, you know, then we were just, you know, we were young and we had energy, we had all the you know, we tried to you know, to build a life here, and of course my kids grew up, and you know, we sold one store to improve ourselves after a while, after a few years. So we never had took time to have vacations because we was constantly, you know, we worked all the time. But after we sold one store, we bought one that would be a day off or show the hours, because the first store was from 7 until 9, or Saturday night was 10 till 10. And then, of course, we close and go upstairs to sleep, which was not not so bad. But after we moved out, it was more difficult, you know, for staying. So we tried to buy a store that was in a better neighborhood. Our English was improved. You know, in the meantime, I became a citizen, and my husband was, after 5 years, he became an American citizen. So, and, you know, we sold one store after, then we sold this after a few years. We changed businesses, also the same in grocery business, but we learned a little bit more to advertise and make specials and put out circulars. So, and then, of course, when the riots came to Baltimore, and I think it was, I believe, in 77, the riots, yeah.
68.
Huh?
I don't know what the Washington were in 68. I don't know about Baltimore.
I think it was 77, and we happened to be in one store that was hit pretty badly. It was on Lexington and Amity, and we, at first, they just, robbed. We were home over the weekend, so they broke in and they robbed the store. It was not neighbors, it was strangers would come in to rile up the neighborhoods and, to cause, these riots. So, of course, they were in downtown, they were doing a lot of robbing, those, television, that showed on television, you could see how they're carrying out from stores, furniture, chairs, wherever they broke windows downtown, there was a lot of, things going on. But our store was robbed, and after a few days, my husband went down to the store, so we realized that the fixtures were not damaged, but the merchandise. So we cleaned up the store, and we were planning to open it, for business. But in the meantime, after a while, another wave of unrest swept through again Baltimore, and they threw a firebomb into the store, and that we were not. My husband was home at that time. It may have happened over the weekend. I don't remember now, but I know a neighbor called and says, "Mr. Martin, if you'll be in the store, they wouldn't touch it, but I wouldn't let him get out of the house because it wasn't worth it to get killed, and it was very dangerous to even get to the neighborhoods." So by then they threw the bomb, and all the fixtures were damaged. So when we realized that it was no use to open the store, we just gave up. And after that, we tried. We didn't go back to this store. It was a total loss, and we didn't have very much insurance because it was a small store. We couldn't afford to pay for a lot of coverage. You didn't expect that it's going to be such a tragedy. But after that, we did not want to go anymore into a black neighborhood. So we decided to go and look for a white neighborhood, and that was our last store that we were on Washington Boulevard. It was not a huge, but it was a small supermarket. It used to be a Eddie's that we bought it, and we were working, but my husband and I, and he had to have already a butcher. We had the different kind of business for more self-service, we put in, we had a butcher, we had a wrapping girl, we had a produce man, and of course stock boys, and of course I would come after I would drop the kids off in the morning to school, I would drive down to the store, and I worked with my husband. Then about 4 or 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I would, get home because the kids were coming from school and I wanted to be home when they would come in. And in the meantime, my kids grew up and they went to high school, and we bought, we moved to not this house, but the house that you were the first time. And that's when my son, his oldest, started Northwestern High School. They just had finished building it, and it was a very good school, Northwestern High School. And my daughter went 4 years later, she went, but by then it was already, the school changed, and I was in the store one day, and the radio in my car said there was a shooting in Northwestern High School. And I know my daughter was there, and I'll tell you, by the time I got home, to see her, that she, it was a shooting, somebody was in the school, there was a shooting going on in Northwestern High School. So, but of course, things like this happen in lots of places nowadays. But they finished Northwestern and they went out to college, and this is how, we settled, and I guess working hard. We tried, but we had in America, we had the opportunity that we didn't want anybody to give us anything. We were just grateful that we had the opportunity to work and come to a country that we were free. And I remember when we first came to Detroit, I was thinking I have to have documents always. So my aunt says, no, you're in America, you don't carry anything with you. Nobody's not going to arrest you. You don't have to prove who you are, and you are free. Because when we came, we were just so going through such a trauma with a war, such a war that it has been traumatic war to live through. So we felt like, there is no place, that it would be peace, but. America was really, the best place in the world for people. They gave us an opportunity that we could work and be independent. I don't care how difficult, how hard it was, but it was. I'm working for myself, and nobody is going to arrest me for anything, or it was just like being born again. It took a while for us to realize that we live in a free country, not even before the war in Poland, where I felt like I was a second-grade citizen, before the war even, and of course after going through the war in Europe and the fires that was going on, losing all the families. But we were the one in thousands and 100,000 to survive, the whole family, the war. But of course we had to pay the price with my parents getting killed, and they were just 50 years old when they were killed. And if they would have made it that night through the border, they would have another 30 or 40 years to live in America, to be productive citizens too. Because my father was energetic, he was, and my mother too, very good, very healthy people, of course, healthy. I don't know what their health was, we were just too young, we were young kids, we were just thrown to, and suddenly they become the mother of the two younger kids, my younger sister. My brother was 5 years younger, my sister was 6.5 years younger. And my older brother happened to become the father, because he was sort of trying to make a home for the kids, the younger two. And we were just suddenly became orphans, and it was a very big, shock to us. But somehow we learned in 4 years, always don't break down, and you keep your hope for to survive, and somehow we survived, and we managed to bring up, have a wonderful family. My kids are wonderful kids. They both very nice children. They're very nice, good people, and that's what's most important to me. I know my daughter happens to be a very good psychiatrist at Hopkins. She worked very hard. She went through this medical. She was actually starting off in evolutionary biology. She left us plants and bugs and all this kind of stuff, but eventually she decided to go to medical school, and she applied to Hopkins and of course to many other schools, and she was accepted, and she started, was going to Hopkins University and then Hopkins Medical School, and the internship and residency. She's been with Hopkins until today. And my son went to University of Maryland, and he was going to engineering. He finished 2 years of engineering, of electronics engineering, but he decided he loved music, and he went away to California, because I bought it for his 16th birthday. I bought him a guitar, and he said that started up his career, because he realized that he has a lot of very good ear, and he is very good to his music. He loves music, and he's actually in California doing a lot with, he wrote and he recorded a CD, and he's working on, he writes the music, he writes the lyrics, and sings and plays guitar and piano. He's went through, while he was there, he went through a lot of, taking courses all the time, but actually he was while he was in college taking courses from engineering, they came in from the Hughes Foundation, and they were trying to get for the summer students to work for them part-time. So he wanted to make some money while he was in school, because he was trying to support himself. But they took him to work part-time, but they liked the way he was working as an engineer for them, so they gave him the job to work for, and also take courses through the computer and on television. I don't know how, but he was working, and they were paying him also to school to get his education finished. So while he was working for them, they was paying very well. So he started to work for them full time, because he was taking courses while he was at his job. During the time that he was working. So he finished, and he made enough money, so he bought a home. And in fact, he bought another house with a friend for investment, which it became too much for him to care for, so they sold it. But he's living in his home. That's where I was just now visiting. It's a very nice big house. But he's still interested in music. He's not interested in engineering, of course. While he was working for them, the whole company was decided to move. I think they moved to Arizona, and they offered him a very good package to come with them, but he didn't want to leave LA, because he was still hoping to do something with music. He was trying to break in the music world. So he didn't want to leave, so he remained, but they left LA, the Hughes Foundation, and so of course he didn't have the job anymore, so he had to support himself from his music, and it was difficult. Lots of times we had to help him out, because he needed to pay the rent and stuff, the rent, after he had a home, he had to pay a mortgage, and there was always, but he was always trying to be self-sufficiently. He didn't live a luxurious life because he was trying to be on his own, like all the young men that went to California, tried to be their own person. But it was difficult, and now that I visited him now, so he's also, he doesn't make very much in music, but because it's a lot of competition, it's difficult, but I visited him because he performed in one place, it was very good. But he's also doing some giving lessons, tutoring. He's tutoring for several companies. So he just, while I was there, he was interviewing some families that to set up for days. So he's doing a lot. I hope that this is going to bring in for him more than the music is, because in the music world it's very difficult unless you have somebody there that can give you a push or give you some, to give you a helping hand. Yeah, but he always wanted to do it on his own, and he struggled. In the meantime, years go by. He's still single. He never married because he never find a girl that would be the right one. Like, yeah, you know how those things go. Nobody's good enough. Like he would be the perfect person.
Right.
But so I gave up. And I wanted to meet, to introduce him to some of my friends. Have daughters that not married, but he says, "Mama, wife, I have to find by myself." So that shut me up for good. So I'm not trying to marry, but he has to find his own person. So, but he's a good man and a good person. That's what most important, So yeah, he's always ready to help out everyone. I was there. There was a sick friend. I never met her, but he drove. I think I don't know how many hours back and forth, a couple of hours. It was in LA, the traffic, because she didn't have any money, just to give us some money so that she can get tomorrow to the doctor or something. Just to, and he's not rich, believe me, he's not rich, but it made me feel like he's feeling for somebody that needed just to give her, he didn't expect that even to get it back, because I don't know how that friend was, but supposedly she has cancer, she needed to go for a treatment, she didn't have money to get a taxi or something, so he drove to get to her house. So that tells me something, that he's a good-hearted guy.
Good for him.
Yeah, so, and good for him. So I cannot complain, thank God for that. My husband passed away 4 years ago, but he was suffering with Alzheimer's. So I've been through quite a long road with that. For 5 years I cared for him at home by myself. And it probably was longer than 5 years too, because sometimes this illness comes on, very slow and unexpected, and when you do something it's not right, it doesn't seem like that the person would do. You think it's just, a mistake, but it starts off very slow, but it keeps progressing and never gets better, it only gets worse. And at the end, so I cared for him. It came to the time that I had to bathe him and dress him and take care of him at home. But
Responsibility.
it was very difficult for me. I ruined my back, and I don't know if it was for that or for whatever reason, but I had to have spine surgery, and I had to, I couldn't, somebody had to be home with him, so I couldn't find. I tried to get some help, and it never worked out. And he promised to come, it didn't show up. Anyway, I had to put him in a assisted living, and it started off in a small place, and I would go there every day. It was not far from my home. I used to be, it was 10-minute drive to his place, and after a while, he needed more care, so he needed to have a facility that they had more care, but there would be a nurse on duty. So And then, it was 5 years he lived in assisted living, and eventually he passed away 4 years ago. So I'm living by myself now, of course, but my daughter wants me to move in, so I'm in transition right now. I'm halfway here and halfway there. I was there yesterday, but yesterday was the elections.
Yeah, that's right.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went yesterday, my daughter dropped me off to the Northwestern High School to vote, and from there a neighbor gave me a ride to my house. And I was there, I had, there are some things that need to be done on the outside. I had a man come and cut my bushes and, the things that needs to be done, but the house is still there. I would have to probably make a decision to sell or something, but, I will probably wind up staying here. My daughter and my son-in-law want me to come to live here, so I am staying here. At first, I was thinking to maybe, stay a little longer, because I feel I'm still able to manage to be by myself, but I had a seizure happening and on the blackout when I happened to stay over my daughter's just for the weekend when her husband was out of town. And I'm lucky that it happened while I was here with her, because I have no recollection of that incident, and it sort of scares me, it scares my daughter, that I might have another incident like this when I will be driving or by myself. And because it just so happened that she's a doctor, she knew what I was so disoriented that she called 911. And they took me with an ambulance to a hospital, to Northwestern Hospital. I have no memory of that. It's like I had amnesia for that night. The next morning, I realized, I looked, and then somehow I remember my son-in-law, he was out of town. But he must have, nowadays we talk on the phone, so all you kids all the time. So he must have arrived, because my daughter followed the ambulance to the hospital. But he must have arrived during the night, or maybe early, because I remember seeing him, and that's the first memory that I have of him seeing, he was sitting, so my daughter went back home, because, but after that I wind up, my daughter took me, the next day she took me to Hopkins. I was at Hopkins 4 days or 5 days, and eventually they still don't know exactly. I think it was a combination of medications that caused a certain pill that I was taking for blood pressure. I was not working well. I had a bladder infection, and the medication somehow gave me some kind of bad effect. I don't know, but this seizure that I had could have been from this mix of the medicines. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's really unfortunate. I could
Yeah.
but that's hard. Is there any maybe message that you would really want to tell everybody after, because it's been almost 50 years since the war ended?
60 years, actually.
Is there any specific thing? 60 years, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's until it was 94. I was married in 1950, and I came to, so from 1950 to 2010, it's 60 years.
Yeah, so it's been
60 years.
60 years. Is there a special lesson that you want for your children and grandchildren in the world?
Well, of course, I felt like no matter how dark the time in your life can look or seem, there is always a better, you just don't give up. Just life is worth fighting for. It's worth living. To survive is, and of course, it's not important if you get to the point where you dreamed of. It's just how you get there that's important. That you should act, with humility, with understanding, to understand that everybody has some days that are dark, that are difficult, but there's always hope for good times, for a better future. and especially that's what I always try to impair my children. Even though we were persecuted, but I never feel that I have any hatred for anybody. I feel like every human being has the right, has the same feelings that people have. You can do always do the something that can improve for your. It's not just for yourself; it's what you do to others that really counts. And I found that lots of times we were helped by strangers, and by complete strangers, and it seemed like when it was very dark, something good came up the next time. And thank God for this. I'm living in a free country, and I can't hope for anything better.
Why do you think you survived?
I don't know. We were just 5 days in Poland, but I remembered so much about from my childhood, from my from Bultus, from my hometown, and I wanted to see it one more time because I have not been there. We've been through the war. We were away. We came back after the war. Never went back to our hometown. And I have such vivid memories of me and my older sister. We were 2 years apart, the one that's in Israel. We were 2 years apart, but we were very close. We used to do everything together. We would help mother in the kitchen. We would clean the house together. We were never fighting or rivalry. We made something new. It was always for the older sister, because that's how it was in Europe. You were the younger one, so you get whatever it was too small for her. It was good enough for me, and that's how. Because we didn't have 50 different outfits. You had one good dress for going to synagogue or to a party, whatever, and that was it. And that was very nice. Some kids didn't have that, but when we came to America, you learn that you need a lot more. You don't really need it.
Yeah,
We are
no.
just having these old things, Now that I'm thinking of selling my house, I'm just thinking, I have so much stuff. It's just stuff. It's just something I have to get rid of, and everything has some memories. I was making a Seder for 30 people. My nephews, my nieces that live around Baltimore, in Washington, in New York, it was too far to travel to Detroit, so they would come to my house, and I was always busy, and I enjoyed having, the family come. And it was something. We had a big family here, and slowly, it's for whatever reasons, it's not anymore. I'm the oldest here. I had my husband's brother that lived here, so their daughter lives in Atlanta. They were getting old and sick, so she wanted them to be near, so they moved to Atlanta. So I don't even have that now. And when my daughter went away with my son-in-law, they didn't want me to be, just in case, and we don't have any family here. And we used to have 70 people in a family circle here. And slowly, for various reasons, some for job reasons, some for going to with relatives to be close, and some of them passed away, a lot of them, so that's what happens. So anyway, are we on?
We are.
I've been talking, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay, Rachel, what did you want to ask me?
When you came to America, did you think of the Shoah often, or the Holocaust, what happened?
Well, we were busy, really. We worked very hard when we came to America. We usually used to socialize with people that were Holocaust survivors, different ones. Some of them were through the concentration camps. Some of them were through, hidings in somebody's attic, and some good-hearted person that allowed them to stay in a basement and hiding stuff. So we felt comfortable with people that were also, and of course, we used our language. We spoke Yiddish, we didn't, we were trying to learn English, but it was more comfortable to speak our home language at home. We always used to speak Yiddish with my parents and with my brothers and sisters who spoke Yiddish. But of course, slowly we all got Americanized, and especially, everybody. In Detroit, everybody was going on jobs, but when I came to Baltimore, everybody was going into businesses. Very few people went on jobs. And we had this cousin of ours that talked with my husband and me, and she offered to, if we would want to go into business, she would, help us, sign for us, which is guaranteeing, a loan in the bank. And of course, we didn't have even a checking account. We were just taking the money to her mother. We used to visit an aunt, which was my husband's aunt, the father's sister. My husband's father's sister was the mother of the woman that was offered to give us a loan. And she went with my husband to the bank and she signed for us, and the banker told her, I said, Rose, because she was in the loan business and she had a loan office, and the bankers knew her, so they said, Rose, she had a Rose Chinese business. I don't know, you kids don't remember that because this business was sold a few years ago. But they had loan offices throughout the city, and they were the ones that used to make loans to women. She was the first woman that was making loans to women because she was working for a loan office, and they never lent money to women, but she was the one. She went on her own, and they used to call her Lady Santa Claus because she used to make loans to people around Christmas time for women. They needed money to buy clothes for the children, whatever. But she was very wonderful, warm person, very good-hearted, and a very good businesswoman. So when the banker told her, Rose, you're signing your name to this guy, he doesn't even speak English. So she told him, you mind your own business and I'll mind my business. But when her daughter got married, and the banker was invited to the wedding, and we were invited, we all had rented tuxedos, and she brought that banker over to our table where we were sitting. She brought over a lot of our cousins. By the way, this same woman, a few other cousins survived, and she helped them come to America. So we all wind up living in Baltimore. That was my husband's father. There were several brothers that had children, and they survived. There were, I think, 3 families that I can remember, 3 or 4 families. So they came. So the banker, so she took the banker, she says, come, she went over to the table from the banker, she said, I want you to meet some people. So she brought them over to our table. We were sitting all the cousins. So she says, you see, this is Moshe Leikach, and this is Mendel Leikach, and this is Max Leikach. Do they look any different than you? Because we were all dressed in tuxedos, and you see, they are independent people. They got on their feet because they needed, when they got their help when they needed it. Now they don't need it. Now they are helping others, because when we got our first grocery store, it was very bad in Israel. And Israel was just established. Was in 48, and that was in 50. So I used to make packages every month. I made up 5 packages of food to go to Israel because they didn't have food. And we knew what it is to be hungry and not to have food. So even though we still owed money for the business because we were paying off, because we didn't go anywhere. We lived upstairs, we lived from the grocery, whatever we were selling, that's what we lived on. So we were helping our relatives in Palestine, in Israel. It was then already Israel. So I remember we were making 5 packages for my sister, for my aunt, the one that my mother's sister that was in Israel before the war, and that's where my sister went to. She took her into her own home when my sister came to Palestine. This Aunt Miriam took my sister in, and she was poor herself, but she gave her a home. But then, because her husband wound up in Cyprus at that time, because they didn't let illegal immigrants come into Palestine. But eventually he came to Palestine and they were to Palestine and then became Israel. But they were having difficulties to get jobs, to get food, and I was planning packages to my sister, to Aunt Miriam, to my husband. Had two brothers and a sister that lived in Israel. They were in Israel. One sister was living there from before the war, and two brothers came after the war. And they were all struggling with, in Israel, so we made 5 packages every month, and we didn't even have a car then to take it to the post office. So one of our salespeople used to come, that used to take an order, he used to sell it to us, to the store, cigarettes or candies. He would take the packages to the post office, and then I started making 5 packages again, until later on we find a way. That was for a long time I was making, and, like cocoa and Crisco and sugar and flour, not powder, but things that they could use in the house, and for food, whatever it was, what we had in our store. And we packed it, because it was very important at that time to help them out. Later, we find a way how to send care packages that I would go to. I think it was in Montgomery, it was an office. I would just go down there and pay, and they would send care packages. I wouldn't have to do, the packing was a big job. I already got the two children. I mean, first I came my son, that, it was I was busy, I was helping my husband in the store and taking care of the baby. So it was easier, but we were still helping out until they all, the situation has improved, and it was a big help. Later we sent even some clothes. This cousin that helped us in the store, she used to bring over clothes to us, and whatever fit me, I would wear for myself. And I was just, just got married myself and never had a honeymoon, for that matter. But we were never asked. I mean, I wasn't expecting any. But we knew we were free, we could work, we were healthy, we were young, and it was a free place, a free country. That was the most important thing. But we were, always trying to be settled. We are happy that we were able to do on our own without, getting support from anybody. And this cousin used to bring over clothes. I used to make packages, even clothes what they needed in Israel. So it was some help for them too, because times were bad, but Israel grew eventually. They got first they had to go through several wars with the Arab countries to attack them, but somehow they survived. It seems like they knew how to. There was the Zionist spirit, that people were so determined to build a country, because the Holocaust taught us that we need to have our own home, which would be that nobody cannot kick you around. When you have you have a country that you can always go to, because Israel always accepted anybody, any Jewish person, no matter from where you come, if you're rich or poor, there was always a place for you in Israel. So that's why there was such important. My father was a Zionist even before there was a Palestine, and that was his dream, that we should sometimes have our own country. And I was just, many times I was thinking, if my father would have lived to see that there is a Israel, I think that was the own dream of his lifetime. And of course he never had the opportunity to see that, but we saw it, and we were very involved with Israel. First of all, we had family there, but that was our country, and no matter how bad the situation gets here, we can always go to Israel. And of course, I wanted to bring my sister over here. I asked them if they would like to come, and she said no. This is the last place the last home, because we have, during the years of the war, we have made so many times a home. Every place we stopped, we thought maybe this will be the place where we'll stay until the end of the war, and we'll go back home, but, it wasn't meant to be, but after we came to America, that was our home. And of course, Israel is still a place that we cherish and we appreciate it really, really, because especially what we survivors, what we, have went through to see in our lifetime a country, and especially it's blossoming. I mean, it's the only country in the old recession that America's going through. Israel is very well off. The industries and the sciences, they have such, of course, I think a very good element of people came from Russia, educated people, and Russian people were, when they let out the Jewish people to Israel, it was a very good element of people. And of course the early kibbutzim worked very hard, and they didn't care about their personal lives. They were just determined to protect the country, because we all realized that if we would have an Israel before the war, maybe 6 million of Jews wouldn't have been killed. But unfortunately, we did not. And it was, at that time, it was a dream. For my parents' time, it was a dream. But in my lifetime, it was a reality. And this is what I appreciate it. And I'm trying to get my children and my grandchildren, they are involved with Israel. They are, committed, to Israel and to the freedoms that Israel is giving to all the people, even though they complain about Palestinians. But the Palestinians that live in Israel don't want to live in Israel. They want to live in Israel. They only want to complain why they don't have this and they don't have that. But they are having more rights in Israel that the Arabs have in Arab countries.
Yeah.
So because
Shame that don't take advantage of it, I suppose. But yeah, but how do you feel about the way that you lived your life, and what's really important to you? I think you seem to really feel proud of what you've accomplished, and that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, I am proud of this, because I feel that I became this nothing. My husband came with a quarter in his pocket. I didn't have anything. We came back with nothing, and of course, especially since my parents were, whatever we had, when we came back from Russia, we started to make candies there, so we started to make money, but we sort of diverted that into the valuable things, and my mother had that all on her. She didn't want the children to be, wearing or risking, they should be robbed or they could get killed. But when my parents were killed, all the, whatever we had that was valuable was on my parents and their packages and their clothes, and so then into garments. But they took everything away, so we lost everything there. Whatever we had made in the good times in Russia, in the end of the last couple of years, we started making candies. We used to make money. We lost it all then. But we find out that money is not important, because one day we were at home, and in one day we were chased out and we became homeless. In 1 hour, it was only in one day that we became homeless. And we had a factory of candies. We had a store that we were selling products, our own products, and products from different companies. And one day they tell me, come down, go out of the house, and we go walk away with nothing. And somehow we managed to go through a difficult times, and lots of times. But for some reason, I find out that valuables are not the whole thing. It's what you have inside of you, the will to survive, the will to be a human being, and not to be just thinking of what is good for me. That's what matters. it's not all, because we find lots of kindnesses from people that, during the hard and difficult and dark days, there was always some things that, that made us stay focused on not the bad, but on the good in people. And I still believe that there are more good people than bad. Of course, the bad ones are the ones that make the headlines, but you don't hear of the good deeds what people do, which, it's really what helps the human race. I think it's getting very bad. You hear about all kinds of things that, people do bad stuff, but I still feel like there's more goodness in people than badness for some reason, I don't know. And my children are very, they are nice kids, nice people. They are, always, even my grandchildren are very kind-hearted. And this gives me a lot of, satisfaction. I cannot provide for their future, for their stardom, or whether they're going to be wealthy or not. But I never made a priority my life to become, wealthy. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you cannot eat any more than I eat. The rich guys doesn't eat any better than I do. Most of the time we're not supposed to eat too much and too good, which is not good for us. So anyway, but I feel that I'm satisfied the way my children, and I visited my son, and I same with my daughter. I think they are good people. That's what makes to me more important than. Of course, it's nice when you make money too. I'm not saying that money is not important. Money is important in life, but it's not everything. It's really not everything, because sometimes with a good deed you can help better than with money in a lot of cases. So I'm satisfied with the way I am now. I don't have big illusions about, whatever. I'm going to live for my children more than my parents left for me, and somehow we managed to survive and raise a good family, good kids, and that's what really matters to me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope that was that went well, and thank you very much. Bye.
I appreciate the opportunity to record my story. You seem to be interested in that, so I actually have a tape that I did for his foundation, Spielberg Foundation. So I have a record of this from my history, but I think I've been through with you quite thoroughly the stories, and
we just have a couple extra questions. I'm just gonna leave it running just for what did you call your parents?
what did I call?
What did you call them?
Mamishi. Mamishi and Tatashi.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, I'm referring to it. And,
right.
and also, could you say the names of all your siblings again?
The names, well, my oldest brother's name is Leo. It was labeled before the war.
Mm.
And my older sister is Bronya in Israel. She's Brindle in Europe. My name is Anne here, but it was Hanka in Polish. And my younger brother is Motek. His name is now Mark. And my youngest sister is Ray in Detroit, and her name was Rivka.
Okay.
Okay. I had a few other questions. You said that you in Russia.
Yeah.
Is that where you worked in the communal settlement, or was it in Uzbekistan?
In Uzbekistan, we were the settlement were the first place that the Russians dropped us off in the forestry, that we worked in forests. And over there we stayed until the Germans attacked Russia in 1941. Poland was attacked in 39, in September 39. But in June, I think it was in June or July, that the Germans attacked Russia. That's when we were freed from the forestry place. And while we were there, we built, I think, 3 or 4 buildings, so that, because, while I was working too. I think I said it in the previous statement. Yeah. But after that, when they told us that we are free to go, we didn't want to stay there anymore. And besides that, it was another lucky thing, because had we stayed there, the Germans were going so fast, they were advancing so quick into Russia, that they eventually came into that place that we were in the forestry. But luck, I think it was God was sort of carried us away from the danger places, because we were chased out from home. It was to us a tragedy, but it was because of that we survived. Because had we not been chased, we would not be leaving our parents, and we would all probably wind up, who knows where, maybe in the Auschwitz, or maybe dead. But we were survived because we came to this other place that the Germans attacked Russia, and we were freed. So we went to Uzbekistan, which is to a hot climate, tropical climate. And of course, we were safe there, but over there we had typhoid, and we had hunger, and we had malaria, but all of these, problems, but somehow we survived there too. And we were able to come back to home, and of course the tragedy that we suffered, of course all the families had losses, but the biggest tragedy was that our parents were killed when they were a year after they survived the war. And that was such a big tragedy to us, because they were only 50 years old, and to survive the war and then get killed, this is what was such a painful thing. But life goes on, and we just had to continue the journey, because we were in the middle of nowhere. We were in Germany, because there were places where they made places for the refugees to stay. It was just refugees that had to be stay there. Some people had relatives in South America, so they were able to emigrate but to America. We didn't have any people in South America, but we had in Detroit relatives. And one aunt, my mother's sister, that lived in Israel, but she was very poor. She got married. She left before the war. She was, I think, 19 years old, I believe, and she left, a single girl. She was to a kibbutz, inspired by the idea that we'll build a homeland for the Jewish people. When she was very poor, and she used to, we find out later, she used to clean houses for people to have any kind of work. And that's how hard she was. Yet she took in my sister. When my sister came into Israel, to Palestine, that's the only family that she had over there. So she took her in. She had 2 children. She put her along with her 2 children, until her husband was able to join her later, at a later date. And of course, they settled in another town. And now she has grandchildren and great-grandchildren in Israel. And and she's still there. And of course, I have in Detroit, my oldest brother right now, he's failing. His memory is not good. I was very upset when I saw him, but he was very happy. He spoke with me, he knows me, but, he's still home, but I have a feeling that he's not well. But all the others, my younger brother, my younger sister is very, very well. She's fine. I had a wonderful time in Detroit with my relatives, so I have cousins there. So we have a very good family, a very warm family. So we appreciate that more than, you know, and everybody is in his own way made a living. My younger sister, she was the one that went to high school. She later married a guy that was in Germany, her teacher. And they by accident recognized each other and they got married. And she lives with this man. He's a very engineer. He used to work for Albert Kahn, a very prominent building company. They built buildings in Russia and in Colombia. They built in Colombia, I think, a General Electric company factory, plant. My brother-in-law was one of the engineers. That's my sister married, and they live in Detroit, and they have 2 children. One is in Washington. She was a lawyer. She married a psychiatrist, and the son is a eye doctor. What you call it? Optometrist. Not optometrist. It's a doctor.
Oh,
Is ophthalmology?
ophthalmologist. I always get them confused.
I don't know. It's a doctor. He's a doctor, a surgeon, and eye doctor. I know it's ophthalmology, I think, or something. Yeah. And of course, you know, we all. So far, we are all 5 kids. We're still alive, and of course, we are all getting older, and I'm feeling pretty good for an 87-year-old lady. So thank God that I am here, and I've been through different ways of life, so I know how to appreciate it. That it's wonderful to live in America, of course. We all know that.
Great. I'm glad that I could have the opportunity to interview you. Yeah, it means a lot, and it's a really special story. So thank you again, and I hope that you do well, continue to do well.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to have you kids. I don't know, I hope it's going to help you in your studies or whatever you do with it. I don't know. So thank you. Bye-bye. Well, let me know when and where. So it's up to, first of all, I'm not allowed to drive yet, you know, because of the seizure. But I'm hoping that maybe in another week or 10 days, I don't know why she doesn't let me, because she's a doctor, so she is very cautious, you know. And the law is, they're very law-abiding citizens, my children. I have to say that. I don't know if I'm proud of that, but I told them, who would know that I had a seizure? Who would tell them that I'm driving to the Giant, that I'm not allowed to drive? It's not like it's written on my forehead on my car, a sign that she's breaking the law. But my daughter says, Mom, you waited that long, so. But a friend of mine called me. I usually walk on the track of Pikes High School because that's my. So we walked with a bunch of people that, you know, some of them from the synagogue, some of them from the people that have been walking for years. So they all wonder what happened to me. So one woman called me, I think it was Sunday. She offered to come and pick me up to go to synagogue Saturday. And because I don't want to impose on people. Are you still recording that?
You're so natural. You're so natural.
I'm so natural. I'm more an actress.
It's okay.